Hello and welcome to Walking the Earth podcast, the podcast about the backpacking experience. You can check us out online at WTEpodcast.com. I'm Justin Castle, calling in from New York City, New York.
And I'm Mike Margulies, calling in today from Hoi An, Vietnam. And our guest is Fraser Baillie. Fraser is in Kathmandu, Nepal at the moment. He's also known as the Cyclehacker. And Fraser, you are basically cycling for 1 year into a cycling trip that may take up to 4 years. Basically, you're cycling around the entire world.
Exactly.
Which is incredible. And so a year into it, you've made it all the way from your home in Scotland all the way to Nepal so far.
That's right. I actually live in England, but I'm originally from Scotland. So my cycle actually started in a very sort of not very well known place in England called Leicester, which is very central. It's near Birmingham.
Okay.
So my journey actually started there. But so from England all the way to Nepal.
And you've been kind of tracking the journey on your site, cyclehacker.com. And geez, you must have a million and one stories. But I mean, I guess what for you, like right now, how are you feeling? A year into the trip, what are your thoughts on the process as a whole?
That's a very good question. I've actually been in Nepal for the last month, and it has been a period of reflection, in all fairness. And I think the overall feeling that I have is that I've started something quite large. I've gotten myself a quarter of the way through, and I still have an awful long way to go.
I'm looking at the map, and you can check it out online at your website, cyclehacker.com, and then it says route to cycle around the world, and that is just squigglies of beautifulness of green and blue, and it's pretty incredible to look at.
This is one of the more ambitious things. We talked to a bunch of adventurers of sorts on this show, and this has got to be one of the more ambitious journeys, I'd say.
And I'm feeling that right now. I mean, before setting off, it's quite easy to look at a map and draw a squiggly line on it and say, right, I'm going to do that. And now a year in and 9,000 miles cycled so far, I'm definitely feeling those 9,000 miles.
Right.
But nevertheless, I mean, I feel really quite inspired to carry on. I've learned so much about myself, so much about the world in this last year, and I feel slightly humbled, but by the same token, equally inspired. And I'm ready to hit the road again. I just recently applied for my Indian visa. I've got to go back into India to get across to Myanmar and on into Southeast Asia. So the plan was to stay in Nepal perhaps for up to 3 months, doing a little bit of yoga, which was a recent sort of escapade. But I think I'm ready to hit the road again. So I'm just going to get on with the cycling, and I think that's really where I'm at my best, to be honest, once I'm on the road. So
Gotcha.
I think sitting around in cities can sometimes just get a little bit too you can get a little bit too nostalgic. You can start thinking about home too much and the things that you miss. And when you're on the road, you don't really get the opportunity to have that sort of indulgence. You're thinking sort of moment to moment. You're thinking about where you're going to eat next, where you're going to put the tent up, where you're going to stop. Am I actually going to get to where I'm going today? So it's a lot more involving. I think when you're stopped, it's easy to get a little bit lazy in the mind and start thinking of home, and that makes it a little bit difficult, I find.
Yeah, but
so you've had recently been thinking about, should I just call it quits and go back, kind of thing?
No, that's never really crossed my mind. What I've probably thought more a little bit about is what will I do after this, and that's something that was certainly inspired the trip to start with. One of the reasons for setting off in the first place was that I was in a very comfortable job. I was earning good money. Had a very comfortable lifestyle, good friends, family all around me. But really felt like I wasn't being pushed or challenged. I certainly didn't feel like if I continued on the same path, I would ever really understand what my full potential was.
Right.
And that was really the whole motivation for doing it. So, and that really hasn't changed. My aspirations, I guess, for the trip before I set off was that maybe perhaps out of this I would find a different path in life that I'd like to pursue. And I guess that's constantly in my mind, and perhaps I need to just sort of let that go for a little while and just enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
But certainly I've been thinking about what to do next.
Right.
I
relate to everything you're saying for sure.
Really?
Definitely, man. I just like you. I had what people would call a good job.
Yeah.
And, all that stuff, things you're supposed to like and want, and there's that. Just like it sounds like similar to you, I had this feeling of just wasn't satisfied. Like, is this it, kind of thing?
Yeah.
So I went on my journey for very similar reasons, it sounds, and also now as I've kind of been talking in the last couple episodes about this, those questions for me were both, I guess, similarly about a year into it. It's like, okay, so now what is the thing that I was trying to find
Right.
next?
Yeah.
And it's, we all have to, I guess, find their own way. Although what I've started to kind of piece together for myself is I've started to piece together a little bit of an outline of kind of things I would like to do and some goals I have. Mm-hmm. And what I don't know, it's kind of along the lines of what you were saying, along with having these kind of goals of things I want to do. Along with that, it's knowing, well, they can change, and it's also not even about the goals so much as the journey itself.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm kind of like, and it's something I think I know.
Definitely.
Always.
Yeah.
But it's, I think you have to go through phases, though, right? Like you said right now you're having this period of reflection. I think that's part of the process, ebbs and flows, the whole thing.
Right.
Without a doubt.
I think that definitely you need that reflection to give you context, because you start cycling and then you get in the cycle. You get it. This is gonna alliterate the cycle of cycling, and you're caught up in the moment. But you need to take a step back and see how far you've come and where you come from to remind yourself who you are a bit. Just I think that's a part of the journey, like Mike was saying, and I know that. I think everybody always constantly wonders what am I doing? What's my goal? What's my end game here? And you never really know until one day you're like, you just do stuff like this podcast. Like you just keep doing things, and eventually things happen, and you realize that holy crap, I really like hosting a podcast. Or holy crap,
right.
I like writing. Like you wrote your Cyclehacking book, or you realize that the journey is equaling the material for this next book you may or may not be working on, et cetera, and then you could be. Have you seen the movie Jennifer?
Jennifer, by Tom Allen.
Yes.
Yeah. Fantastic book.
We've been in touch with him to potentially bring him on in a future episode.
Awesome. Well, I wrote an article for his website back in October last year. Yeah, he featured me in one of his articles. I wrote the article, he edited it, and he put it up on the website. So yeah, I've been in touch with Tom, and I bought his film before heading off on my own adventure. So yeah, no, he seems like I've never met him personally, but he seems like a really nice guy.
Yeah.
His
a lot in common with you, right, fellow long-term cycler?
Yeah, and his writing is fantastic. I don't know how much of his blog that you've actually read, but he does have a real talent for writing.
Right.
Telling stories is it's a great blog he has.
Yeah, and I think you have similar journeys. Like you don't know what you're looking for, but you'll find it out there on the road somewhere somehow.
Yeah.
And if not,
definitely.
if not, you'll travel around the world for 4 years, and then you'll come back and have a kick-ass story to tell grandchildren someday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
well,
all. Sorry, carry on.
Oh, go ahead, man. All you.
I was just going to say that's always the fallback position, you know. if nothing else comes out of this, I've still cycled around the world. I mean, that's a pretty good effort in itself.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
I would say that is quite an accomplishment. I mean, you know, it comes back to what we were talking about. What is life about? It's not about destination. It's about the journey. And my God, what more of a journey can you have than cycling around? You know, that's not something you're ever going to look back and say, oh man, what a terrible thing. You know, that would be one of the defining things you've done, an accomplishment in your life. And that, you know, life isn't you could have alternatively spent those 4 years continuing in the same job you were in, and maybe would have gone higher in your career and gotten a promotion.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think you would look back that would have been a better use of my time than cycling the entire world. You know.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
And I think the journey itself is, I mean, for me, and I maybe you feel similarly, but yeah, you don't know when you start these kind of journeys exactly where it's going, exactly where it's taking you.
No.
But that's kind of why you're on the journey in
Yes.
the first place. You went to try to figure out what that thing is.
Definitely.
I have a couple of questions regarding Cyclehacking. So Cyclehacking is the book that you wrote, but it's also a kind of a lifestyle. I want to know if you could explain for the listeners what Cyclehacking is, and also, did you develop this before your journey, and that basically inspired you to go and say, I'm traveling the world now? So if you'd start with explaining Cyclehacking for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I came up with the phrase cyclehacker when I was working on the journey. So probably before I set off, it was about 18 months, and I started to think about going cycling. And that time I was saving money for the journey, and I was also thinking about how I could document it and how I could use what I was documenting for some future career, perhaps, or some other future good. So I started to think about, you know, what the process was that I was going through. Why was I going about doing this? And I felt that it was something that probably there was a lot of other people had similar feelings of. So I came up with cyclehacking, and the whole purpose of that really is to look at the habitual behaviours and thought patterns that you have in your life, and to look at how they're serving you. Just try and look at them objectively. You know, how do you spend your time every day? Where is that taking you?
Right.
And cyclehacking really is about kind of shaking all that up, you know. And going on a journey by bicycle was kind of like the furthest sort of polarity to the life that I was living. You know, I don't have a history of going camping. I don't really have a long history in cycling. I did when I was a child, but I hadn't been on a bike for the last, I think it was like 17 years. I hadn't been on a bike.
Right. Yeah.
I was fairly athletic. I did enjoy sport. That was one of the reasons for choosing cycling as a medium, because it was something I was interested in. So cyclehacking was kind of about looking at the things that you're good at, looking at the things that interest you, and then just following them and seeing where they take you. And in doing so, challenging all those habitual patterns of thought and behaviour that you have, really to try and, you know, make sure that you're heading in the direction that you actually want to go. Because a lot of these habits and behaviours are just that. They're habits, you know, the things that you don't actually think about anymore. You just do them.
Right.
But if they're not serving you, then why continue doing them? So
right.
Yeah, that was kind of the whole thinking behind it. And when I started to write the book, I started to look more deeply into how habits are formed and how you can change habits. And I have a background in neuro-linguistic programming, timeline therapy, and hypnosis, which is all about behaviour and understanding how the mind works. So I kind of combined that with some more recent research on habits, and then tried to put into tried to present a way for people just to sort of easily look at their habits and change them. So yeah,
so almost like almost a step by a thought-provoking book about how to break your own patterns in life to better yourself. So that's what is that a good summary?
That was a much better summary than mine.
Oh no, I think it's really cool though. I also really like how you use cycle to have like a double entendre there. It's cycling, and it's also about the cycles, like your habits. So you are essentially cycling to break your own cycles.
Exactly.
You're bicycling to break your habits, and I think the concept is really cool though, because when I was reading on your site on like the why section, you kind of gave the explanation of cycle hacking there as well. I mean, and kind of restating what you said, you and Justin have said, you're essentially breaking your habits. Really, it's about overcoming your fears as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. It's like we get in these habits, just because it's comfortable and it feels safe and secure, and we get very much at ease. And rather than seeking out a passion, following that passion, like you were just saying, we tend to just stay where we feel secure and safe.
Right.
And so cycle hacking is the cycle, you're learning, evolving, break the habit, and keep going, keep progressing.
Exactly, and to be honest, it's something that I've reflected back on recently over this last sort of month. I've been thinking about it and how easy it is to get back into habits. Even now that I'm on the road, I've been noticing this month there's certain habits that have crept back in, and even when I was cycling from sort of northern India into Nepal, that 3-week period, you start to get into the same sort of cycles of pattern to your day, and it's the same thing that happens. Even though I've taken a big step away from the comfortable life that I was living in, a conventional life, I guess, I've gone into a fairly unconventional life. I'm still managing to find ways. It's like the mind is just programmed to find ways of making your day, comfortable and happy. And actually, you continuously have to question these cycles of thought and behaviour that happen, regardless of the circumstances you throw yourself into.
Right.
So
that's very true.
Yeah, it's been. I mean, I guess you must have found that as well, Michael. I don't know what your background, Justin, is with travel, but you must have found the same sort of thing.
I definitely can relate to that. So I'm doing this long-term backpacking thing, traveling around India, Southeast Asia, yada yada. But even though I'm doing this thing that for an American home is like, oh, this is so crazy and wild, you do still get into habits, right? And it's very easy to fall into patterns all the time, so you can follow a pattern of, well, I know I get to a new town, I know how to find a hostel, I know how to make these friends and do these, you kind of get into something of a routine for finding a place. Sometimes you got to shake it up a little bit.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I want to say from my standpoint as well, I definitely noticed that I was lit. So I am not a huge traveler. I've gone on a couple trips, Fraser, but I moved from one city in Syracuse, upstate New York, which is fairly isolated and not a big town, to New York City. Yeah. And I noticed actually just the other week that I was actually just thinking about this the other day, that I've gone and gotten back into the same pattern or similar patterns that I had when I was in Syracuse. And it took me a while, but eventually what happens is I get into committing to certain things. Like I do something every night of the week, and I'm very busy and I don't have time to think about anything. Like when I was in Syracuse, I had improv and masonry and all these different activities during the week, and then by the weekend I'm exhausted, and I'm back I'd say just a couple weeks ago, just hit that point again where I'm like, all right, I'm so busy every night of the week, I've got something, my time is booked up. And it took me about 9 months to get back into that cycle. But it's really, you're right, it's no matter if you're cycling or you're backpacking or you're just moving, life is very cyclical. And it just hit me again. It took me a while. The only difference is I think there's change, though. With this move, I think that there have been changes in my perspective and my overall behavior, adapting to the city lifestyle. And I was lived very, very much domesticated, almost like try to be in bed by a certain time. I was so exhausted I couldn't afford to be up past a certain time. But now I'm trying to give more time to go explore and to do all these activities. Wake up early and do podcasts. Stay up late to try to record podcasts and go to see shows. But I feel like I'm getting back into that habit of, okay, it's time to simmer down now. And I'm sure on the road, you're in the same boat to some degree.
Definitely. And I think it's a lot to do with the way that our minds are structured, and the way that we process information naturally causes us to form habits. And it actually causes us to attract certain things that we believe and we like and we enjoy into our lives. So it kind of makes sense, if you lift, if you uproot and you head somewhere new and you put down your roots. In that process of putting down your roots, you start to seek out the things that you're comfortable with. Right. So the same process happens all over again, and that's been something that's just literally in this last month I've started to look at again. I thought, I need to switch things up again. I need to get back to doing things differently. I need to start challenging the new routines that have become part of my norm, and start to do things differently again.
Right.
And I think another aspect of it, and I'd be interested to hear your comments on this. I think cycles and habits can also be a good thing. We're talking on the context of breaking habits, breaking things that keep things routine. But you can also, and maybe this is something you touch on in your book as well, like if you are mindfully using your habits, I think you do touch on this in some of your description here, you can use them for good. You train yourself to have really good habits and improve yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I guess that's the overall goal really, is to just sort of seek out the stuff that you have that are habits and patterns of behaviour that are not serving you, and just replace them with stuff that's really good. And in that sense, making something that you're doing, making something that's good for you a regular habit. That's the end goal really, is to
How much?
In a sense, it's kind of like mindfulness of habits. It's like, okay, what are my habits that are not helping me? How do I break those? And then what are some habits that would be good for me that I can start forming? So it's really kind of almost a mindfulness and control over your habits is kind of the idea, it sounds.
Definitely.
Yeah. Something I definitely subscribe to personally, at least.
Yeah, and I think also it's quite important that you kind of almost need to replace habits, because if you dismantle a habit, it kind of leaves a bit of a void.
Right.
So you almost have to substitute habits.
Yeah.
So if there's something that you need to change, it's literally just changing your behaviour from one thing to another. That's because you ultimately, there's certain things that you do in your life, that we all do every day, day in, day out, and a lot of it's just down to decisions and.
It's almost like we're addicted to habit. So if you get rid of one addiction, you need to have another addiction to replace it. Like where humans are programmed to be addicted to habit.
Well, we just talked about this before. What about Rich Roll? Like, he was an alcoholic, and he's apparently has one of the. I honestly hadn't heard of him before, but apparently he's what is it? A extreme fitness person? Is that what you'd call him?
He's an ultra triathlete. Right. Is what he does. So he does some pretty sick distances running by. He does Ultraman, which is that's running. I think it's Hawaii each year. I think that's starts with a swim, which I think the swim's like 12 miles. Then it's a 180-mile cycle, and then it's an ultra marathon, which is like a 50-mile run at the end of it. So if you can imagine doing all that, it's pretty sick distance.
I think, and isn't the story here that he was once an alcoholic, and he replaced that with being really fixated on fitness and health, and now he's turned everything around. He's doing very well for himself. So that was my analogy for saying, hey, replacing one habit with another. So, like
absolutely.
So for your travels, etc. Like, so say you notice. I want to know. So say you notice you're getting back into a habit. Do you do an if-then statement? If this, then I will do this instead.
Yeah. I do, and there's a certain discipline that's required in order to hold yourself accountable, and certainly what I've noticed recently is that I've not been as good at holding myself accountable, and I think that's something, that's kind of, you got to go through waves and phases, and I think I'm at the point where I'm in the process of putting down some lines in the sand, which are going to be more like carved in rock.
You have a good example?
Should I have my way? Good example. Let me think now. Well, one of the things that I've gotten into the habit of, particularly coming through India, has been not to wild camp. So through Europe, through Turkey, Iran, I predominantly used my tent. I travel with a tent, and I basically just live on the road.
Right.
And it gives you a very pure experience. It just removes you from sort of everyday life, and you just become very sort of present with the day, the cycle, the people that you meet, the landscape. You just become very, very present and aware of what's going on around you.
Right.
And coming through India, I just felt very cautious. India was, like, for me, it was my biggest concern. The place that I was most concerned about visiting has always been India. And I met a few people, and they sort of said you need to be careful about people stealing things, and it kind of created in my mind, I guess, what I was already looking for, in the sense that it was somewhere I was concerned about, and I wasn't really going to take any risks when I was in India. So I always chose to find somewhere to stay. So I'd find like a guest house or a hotel, and that just kind of became the habit then.
Okay.
Even if there was an opportunity to put the tents up, I just wasn't seeing them anymore.
Right.
And then the same thing happened when I went to Dharamsala. I stayed there for a month and did a yoga teacher training, and then cycled from there for 3 weeks to Kathmandu in Nepal. And during that process, I mean, it wasn't a particularly enjoyable period on the road, and I was, more than happy to be stayed in hotels, quite honestly. But having come into Nepal and the landscape here, and the people are a lot more friendly, I've found. One of the things that I want to make sure that I do between here and re-entering India on the east side of Nepal is to do it through wild camping. So, perhaps maybe once a week, go back to what I was doing through Europe, maybe once a week find some, solid shelter with a connection so I can update my blog.
Right.
But basically just get back to basics, get back to pure, bicycle touring. I think that's something that I've actually been missing, I think. Is just that connection with the bike, the landscape, the journey, and as a result, the people. It's just going back to basics again, really. So that's probably the big thing I'm going to hold myself accountable to.
I gotcha. Well, also you've been, I'm sure you feel that you've been a little bit stagnant because you've been in Nepal for a while, and I think you might be chomping at the bit to get out and get back get on your journey again. So I'm sure that's subconsciously bubbling up every now and again.
Without a doubt.
Although, even though you've been in Nepal, say in Kathmandu for some time, I would say you have not been stagnant, though. You've been working. I mean, your journey is it's a cycling, but also I guess there's like a spiritual aspect of it. You've talked about yoga, but you did 10 days of Vipassana meditation as well, which I've also previously done.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't call you exactly stagnant there.
Right. No.
And I know that is, that's a very intense experience. I can say firsthand. So you definitely were not sitting idle.
No, right. Definitely not. And as you say, it was a fairly powerful experience, and it did. If I'm absolutely honest, it did kind of knock me a little bit sideways. So, the break in Kathmandu has been a great time to reflect. And by the same token, it's been quite intense too. So. I don't think there's ever really a totally comfortable moment when you're traveling, because everything is so impermanent.
Right.
So you never really get to fully relax. I think that's one thing that I've kind of noticed.
Really?
Yeah. when I'm staying in a city, I don't feel fully relaxed. When I feel most relaxed is when I'm sat, next to my tent, cooking something in the middle of nowhere, because there is no demand on me there.
Right.
It's not costing me anything to stay there. There aren't people, walking past, trying to get me to go on a trek somewhere else. There's just no distractions. So
Okay.
the place where I feel most rested and settled is when I'm, out on the road. It's still living in my tent. I mean, that's what I most enjoy.
Ah, okay.
I feel like a pull and a tug in this. I mean, as when I'm moving, not cycling, as you were. Oh, actually, I have a bicycle here. Actually,
Really?
in Hoi An. I have been bicycling around Hoi An, which has been cool. They have a nice bicycle culture here. So
Awesome.
past few days, I actually have been bicycling around the place. But in general, when I'm on the move, there's definitely that excitement that comes with it,
Right.
for sure.
Yeah.
But then there's that part of me that does crave the stability. But then when I'm stable, there's the part that craves the, it's always that tug and pull and tug.
Yeah.
When I'm stable, I want adventure. When I'm out, I want stability,
Mike,
Yeah.
I want to know, do you ever feel, when do you feel those moments that Fraser said about, do you feel like you can sit and breathe and feel comfortable at any given moment? And when are those times? Because it's or do you
For
constantly
me,
have the
the
push
times-
and the pull of all right, I'm here, I'm waiting to leave my time here, and then all of a sudden you're moving, and then while you're moving, you're thinking about this, that, and the other. Do you have any of those moments?
Well, it's not so much that like I'm moving and it's like, oh no, I need to stay still and I'm still and I want to be moved. It's more like things I've talked about on the more recent episodes where as I'm on the road and I'm traveling solo, and so I'm meeting friends in different places, but I just the sense of not having the stable, consistent friendship. Times like that where I'm saying, okay, it would be nice to have a stable, say, a crew around me, so to speak, right?
Right.
That's kind of the feeling. But if you're asking about when do I feel those times where
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I feel nice and content and good, it all comes back to people ultimately. So although I am with the part that's hard is that the relationships are transient. When I do find myself in with a really good group of people,
Yeah.
I give you a good example. Last night, I rode my little bicycle down to the riverside in Hoi An. By the way, this city of Hoi An is I don't know any other word to describe it besides charming. It's just this
Nice.
charming place, like little very relaxed town with lights and riverside, and I kind of saw the sign that said free shisha for groups of 3+ and free rum and coke, and also 50-cent beers, and so I was like, okay, well, I need 2 more people. And the first 2 people that came my way, this French guy and a French girl happened to walk my way and said, hey, you guys like shisha?
Right.
We got on, there was also a free boat to it was the island restaurant where this was all going down. Sure enough, we each paid for 1 50-cent beer. Along with that, we each got a free rum and coke and a free shisha to share.
Awesome.
I'm sitting there with this, which was a fantastic experience. But I'm sitting there with this group, and as is very common thing that happens, it's you bonded with these folks immediately, and that's what happened. That's one of the more beautiful things about this experience. You meet people you've known for a few minutes, and you connect on a very deep level. So I'm talking to this group of these 2 brand new friends, and we're all connecting. We all kind of look at life in a very similar way. We connect on a deep level, and those are the that was one of those moments where I'm sitting there thinking, this is what it's about. Just feeling that kind of a connection. And so that, I guess that was the long-winded answer to your question.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'd probably agree with that as well. I mean, the times that I've felt most sort of at peace is when I'm with other people. The yoga training was good.
Right.
Finishing up on the Vipassana, the last day was really good, just sort of sharing experiences with people. And since then I met up with Chad, a mutual friend of ours. And we had a good night together, and I'll probably see Chad again this week as well before each of us leave Kathmandu. And yeah, when I'm with other people, I guess that's the big difference. On the bike, I spend an awful lot of time on my own. I don't have those sort of common experiences where travellers kind of congregate, moving from one place to the next. So whatever form of transport that you use normally, whether it's a bus or a train or a plane, there's an opportunity for you to bump into other people doing similar things.
Right.
Whereas on the bicycle, I think I've probably only met maybe a handful of other cyclists along the way. So when I'm traveling, which is the bulk of my time, I'm on my own.
Right.
And I guess when I'm on my own in cities, I feel probably most restless actually, and sort of least comfortable, unless I'm with some really cool people,
Well, I was, trying to make it. I was in Saigon for a couple of weeks because, what we were talking about was I had that feeling I wanted to kind of stay in one place just to make more stable relationships, all that stuff. And while I was in Saigon, I was trying to make it work. And I met some really cool people. I met some really cool locals and some other expats that were also really cool people. But I just still find myself during everyone's still there. You're in a city. Everyone's very busy with their lives, doing what they're doing, and so I'm. Evenings, weekends, I'd hang out with these folks, and it was great. But I found myself kind of in a city, restless and alone a lot of the time. Yeah. Kind of thinking like, I don't know if this is ultimately, I ended up leaving.
Yeah.
Definitely relate to what you're saying.
I feel like hearing that, I think I get it. I understand, because that when you're traveling, the one concrete thing you do have is the traveling. That's the one concrete thing you have. So, for example, I thought about this while you guys were chatting. I'm in the habit of being in one place, okay? You've broken that habit, and now you're in the habit of traveling. And now every time you stop, you're breaking that habit. And
that's a fair
point. That's the one consistent habit that you have is getting on the road and going to the next place. And that is your comfort right now. You've done the inverse of what I currently have. So, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'm still hopeful that at the vague plan now, it's never really solid, but heading back towards Chiang Mai, where else that I'll find every time I've been there previously, kind of felt right, and it was kind of like I never wanted to leave. So I'm hoping that is still the same. So that will be a place where I can break the habit and maybe stay there and feel good about it,
Yeah.
Stick some roots down.
Yeah, something like that. So at least for me, settling down just means staying somewhere for a couple of months versus a couple of weeks.
It is
something like that.
It is difficult, but I get what you're saying, Justin, about travel is the constant, and now it becomes the comfort. When you're in a place and you're not feeling that great, it's almost like the way that you fix it is to move on.
Yeah.
That's true. That is true. You are onto something there.
I can definitely relate to that. I can relate to that.
Yeah. That's kind of like every time I'm in a place, I'm like, all right. Well, there's always that time, right? Where you're like, well, this is the time to move.
Right.
You just get up and go.
Yeah.
You're onto something.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take things, I think, to kind of our wrap up question that we ask our folks, Mr. Fraser. And so I'd like to ask you is, what is something that you would like to do in your life before you kick the bucket?
Something I would like to do before I kick the bucket. Interesting question. Well, I mean, the obvious answer is just to complete this journey that I'm on now. I mean, I think that would be something pretty special to do.
That's a fair. You're still talking about another 3 years of a goal here, so I'll accept that.
Another 3 years to go. I think beyond that, I would like to write a really good book that was taken on by a publisher and went through the traditional route and was sold and bought on its merit. I think that's something that I would really like to do before I kick the bucket, is to write something really, really good that people buy.
Awesome.
Well, you've got a book now. And I certainly wouldn't want to diminish that, because you did write a book, which is cool, like something most people have not done.
Yeah.
So for folks who are interested in reading the book you have written, it's about cyclehacking. It's called Cyclehacking. And well, I think something you're doing that's cool is, to buy the book. It's not any money. You're not taking any money for the book. People just make a donation of their choice.
Yeah.
To the Room to Read cause. So basically, it's going to be to ultimately build a school. somewhere in need, to be determined at the time when the funding is acquired.
Yeah.
But yeah, to purchase your book, they can make any amount of donation they want to this cause, and I think that's a really cool thing that you're doing. So certainly don't want to diminish that at all.
No, thank you. And as part of this journey, I mean, the one of the sort of fairly challenging aspects of it, beyond the cycling and the personal experience, is the fact that I do want to build a school with the charity Room to Read, and I guess that would be a really that really is the end of the journey for me once that's done. So whether I've raised enough money by the time this cycle around the world is finished or not, I certainly won't stop fundraising until enough money has been raised to build a school. So that's another.
So you've got several goals: cycle around the world, and build a school, and write a book.
Wow! Hey man, you got the next 20, 30 years mapped out. We got 3 for the price of 1.
You did.
That's great, man. Folks that are interested in either purchasing the book, donating to the cause, or finding out more about you, the best place to find you is your site, cyclehacker.com. You're also on Twitter at Cyclehacker, on Facebook, facebook.com/CyclehackerWorldTour. But as always, we will put links to your site, all the ways to find you, on our site when we post this episode at WTEpodcast.com. Every episode, if you haven't seen the actual site itself, every episode we post, it comes with a little blog post that has additional material, content related to the episode. So other things we've mentioned along the episode, we'll throw in there as well, all the links to find Fraser and other goodies.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Thank you guys. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on the show, man.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's been awesome. And thanks to all of our listeners out there listening to Walking the Earth podcast, the show about the backpacking experience. We'll talk to you next time. Take care.